You ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
What's that fresh? Howdy there, true believers. Welcome back to the podcast New World Nation, official podcast of the NewWorldNerds YouTube channel. If you're new to the podcast, here's what we do. We rewatch and review one Marvel Cinematic Universe movie a week leading up to Avengers Endgame. I'm your host, Superman Nico, and my co-host is different every week until I run out of friends. Jak-Attack, the one and only, is our guest this week. Go ahead and make some noise.
Whoop whoop. Hello, it's Jak-Attack. I'm back. You thought I was gone.
Yeah. Don't call it a comeback. Join us as we approach the end of the line. This episode, we watched Captain America, the First Avenger. And boy, it was a doozy.
Oh, that's for sure.
I don't remember where I left my notes. They're in this book somewhere. What did you think of Captain America, the First Avenger?
To be honest, from the early Phase 1 MCU days, I thought it was very well executed. I thought it was, excuse me, I thought it was a really good introduction into how Cap was going to be able to join the Avengers in present day without having to drag too much into a somewhat sob backstory. It was really good at being able to tell his origin without dragging too much. I thought that they hit on a lot of the nods from the comics very well, since it was done in the 40s. I believe Jack Kirby had first published him in 1941, which was during World War II. So, of course, the plot is centered during World War II, which was perfect, but they did a lot of good nods to the original comics as well. So I really enjoyed that. And I think when you had Iron Man and Hulk already out, it was kind of like, well, what do you do? And it was kind of a risk to tell a story from the past at that point when those stories were present day. But I think it wove itself into Phase 1 very well and definitely did establish itself for what was going to be Avengers moving forward in 2012.
Heck yeah, for sure. I remember when they first announced that Chris Evans was going to be Captain America, and I was definitely one of those people who were like hesitant because I saw Fantastic Four, and I was like, this guy isn't like swole enough to be Captain America, and boy was I wrong, because he just freaking nailed it. And not just that, I don't know if it's because of this role or just because Chris Evans is a good guy, but it seems like in real life he's kind of like Captain America too.
Oh, I know, most definitely. It's kind of like, so I have to agree with you what you first said about Fantastic Four, because whenever the announcement was made that he was going to take the helm as Captain America, my first thought was, how can he be in two Marvel movies at once? And is this going to work? But of course I was proven wrong, just like I feel like most of us were. And I do agree about the sentiment that he kind of has embodied like what the spirit of Captain America is, because what most people talk about whenever they see that is he's a really big advocate for equality and just having us as an American society be better than we were before. And you see that a lot on Twitter because he's not shy about expressing his beliefs and advocating for what he believes in. And considering social media has evolved so much in like the last decade or so, and people are able to connect more, especially celebrities with their fans on a one-on-one type setting, I think people are able to see that. And so regardless of what happens to him in this franchise moving forward, I think he really does embody Captain America, just like everyone says. And so I do think it was a perfect choice looking back now. It's such a good reminiscing type moment to see that and how he's evolved, not just as like an actor, but like, with the franchise in general.
Yeah, the first time I was like, all right, I think he can do this was when the first trailer came out back when we were in high school. Whenever they revealed like him coming out of that pod and like showing him ripped. And,
oh my gosh, yeah.
And I was like, holy shit. Like, that's Captain America right there. And then, just throughout all the movies, throughout the storylines, you definitely see it shine through. I think what Captain America is to Marvel Studios or to the MCU is what Superman should have been to the DC or the worlds of DC or the Warner Brothers universe.
Yes, I completely agree.
I think you see it more more so, I think, or it cemented more, I think, in Winter Soldier with his monologue there, but definitely can see the seeds here. And I remember thinking that this, or I think this is the worst Captain America, but just because the other ones are so good. And I definitely think, and I'm pretty sure I'll still think this after we rewatch The Winter Soldier and Civil War also, that this is the best Marvel trilogy.
Oh no, I completely agree. It looking back at it, it's like it's so hard, not just with any MCU trilogy, but just any trilogy in general. The main obstacle for most installments like that is how do you overcome the success of the first one? And so a lot of people didn't really expect Winter Soldier to do as good. And so once that one kind of like elevated the status of Captain America, and then you thought, oh, it can't get any better than that. Then you get to Civil War, it's like, wow, the first movie was so good, yet if you compare it on the trilogy scale, it's kind of the worst one, which it sounds odd to say that, but I mean, you look at how much the trilogy's evolved, it's like that's how you expect it to be in just any type of film franchise, not just the MCU. You expect it to get better with every single step you take, and it's one of the few that actually executed so well on it. And so when you look back at it, it's like, wow, they laid such a good foundation to build on in the first movie that most people don't get to appreciate that. And so I think that's a really big point to make a note of as well.
And each movie is so different. This is a war movie more than it is a superhero movie.
Exactly.
And then the second one is this spy thriller espionage, like almost 70s like tone to it. And then Civil War is a superhero event, but it's also a very personal story towards the end and throughout the whole Bucky and Steve storyline.
Right, exactly. And like you said, everything changes as far as like the ambiance and the setting of like the film and like how it's supposed to be. I mean, like you said, the second one is is essentially like a spy thriller, and then the third one you get to like a more personal rooted level, but it's also so politically charged. And especially like when it was released in 2016, the climate that we were in at the time, like it kind of just went with the times. And so you think of it and it's like, wow, to see the movies evolve with where we're going is so great too. But I definitely do agree, like how, especially with the Bucky and Steve storyline, how that carries out and that's so consistent in each film. And just that theme of like friendship and brotherhood, that's like a really big thing that most people don't seem to notice. I mean, you see the memes where it's like, oh, Bucky, like anything for Bucky, any of that kind of stuff. But like it's like if you look back at the first one, there's moments where it's like it's more than that. It transcends like friendship and brotherhood. It's so deep rooted, almost like soul level, like for Steve and Bucky, like the way their relationship is with one another, that it's so hard for people to actually like see that and appreciate that. It's not until you get to like what we're doing now, reflecting back on the series and looking back to the first one, you appreciate it so much more. Like I know there's the moment where Steve rescues Bucky after he had been experimented on, and they're trying to escape because they've gotten everyone out, and the bridge breaks, and they're trying to figure out what to do. Yes, he says, no, just go, and Bucky says, no, not without you. Like he shouts it so adamantly and so passionately, and it's like, who how can you say that about someone that's like just a friend? Like it is so soul level, like it is so deep. And looking back, I just appreciate moments like that so much.
There's a really small moment when they're at the Stark Expo where they like kind of like go at odds when he's just like, oh, like there's men giving their lives, why should I give any less? And Bucky's getting kind of like upset, like stop trying, like you're not gonna get in. And not just that, like you don't want to go, like it's not like a happy place, it's not like a good thing. But then like they have like their little beef, and then they come back and they hug and they're like, all right, like get out of here, you knucklehead, like that just felt like such like a real moment where it's just like, yeah, like we're upset, but guess what, we're still best friends, so like I love you.
Yeah, exactly. And like you see it too in the beginning, like the small moments where it's Bucky, the one that's being Steve's savior, where it's like he gets him from those guys that were trying to beat him up in the alleyway. And that's when he holds up the trash can, which was like a little nod to like him eventually having a shield, the trash can lid. And then you go to Winter Soldier where they do the flashback moments, and it's the most iconic quote, the I'm with you to the end of the line, pal. Like probably one of the most iconic quotes in the MCU franchise, not just Captain America, I think. And it's like it's little moments like that, it's so small but so powerful too. Like they really knew how to play on their relationship, and that's what I really liked.
Yeah, that alleyway was full of good quotes because you got the "I can do this all day," which has been repeated, and it's great. How do you think the body swap held up? Because when I first heard about it, I'm like, that's really weird. But I think this was the only way they could have done it. I remember when I saw it, it didn't seem that jarring. Even now, it doesn't look that bad, but I can definitely, tell, because who couldn't tell? Because Chris Evans is a beast, But I don't think it's bad, and I think it does hold up, especially for Phase 1 Marvel.
Oh, yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it was a risky move, but at the same time, it had to be done. Because if you look at Chris Evans, like, he's what, like, past 6 feet? I think he's, like, maybe, like, 6'1" or something like that. And so you realistically, especially, like, you look at the comics, you look at Cap's origin story. I mean, it's not to, like, crap on him or anything, but he was a frail, small dude. That was just it. So how are you going to have Chris Evans do double duty? Like, that's physically impossible. And, considering CGI has come a long way since 2011, even though that was not that far at all. Every year though we get so better technologically as far as cinematography is concerned. I think they executed it very well, because if you look, in the bonus features, you can find them on YouTube if you don't have the DVD. That's usually what I would do whenever I didn't have them. You look at the guys that they had, and so basically Chris Evans, he films every scene because they need to capture his face, but they also have the lines on there so that way they can proportion it to the body double who's playing him as pre-serum Steve. And so I think they were very delicate with the way they did it, and it's almost, I say almost because it's not completely, it's almost seamless, which makes it that much more, I guess, realistic when you look at it.
I think them doing that makes a lot of sense, because there's a lot of time in superhero movies where it's just like, oh, like, this guy's a dork, he can't get the girl. Like, say, I'm thinking of like Andrew Garfield or like Tom Holland or Tom Welling in Smallville.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's just like, oh, I'm the dork, like, oh, I don't have any friends, blah, blah, blah. It's like, come on, this guy's drop dead gorgeous. Like, all right, like, look at him, like, perfect jaw and everything like that. No, you're not. Like, girls are going to be like, oh, what a dork. Like, but for this body swap, because he's so short and stuff like that, like, you can kind of tell where people would be coming from, because he is really small. Like, I wouldn't think he would, like, be able to put up a fight or anything like that. And I think it's really good. Or that's definitely one of the benefits from the body swap. There is one thing that this movie reminded me of, and I thought about in Avengers, where Tony's like, everything special that came out of you, or everything that's special about you came from a bottle. And it's just like such not the truth, because if you gave this serum to that other dude, I think he'd be super dead. What was his name? Dutch.
What's
Something
his
like
name?
that.
I know who you're talking about, because they were talking about like, oh, it needs to go to him, and they're like, why? It amplifies. Like, that's when Erskine is like telling the general, and then he goes and tells Steve too. Whenever Steve's scared the night before, he's like, the serum, it's not just gonna make you like better, like, physically. It amplifies different parts of the personality. And whenever it goes back to whenever they do the false grenade test, and Steve is the only one to jump on it, and Erskine is just proving him right. It's amplifying his personality of wanting to be the person that's going to lay down their life if they have to for the other one, so that way they showing basically that, he is a giving person and that he does want to be a protector, but he's also looking out for the well-being of other people, and he actually cares about the people.
Laying down on the wire and letting the other guy crawl over him.
Yes, the line. Going back to Tony referencing that argument with Tony and Steve in Avengers.
I think Tommy Lee Jones was perfect in this movie, and I love the line where he's like, well, he's still skinny.
Oh, yes.
Stick a needle in his arm and it'll go right through him. Talking about Tommy Lee Jones, I think this cast was great. I think Peggy Carter or Agent Carter was somebody. When I saw this, I think it was her hair. I immediately thought like Black Widow. I was like, oh, she's like a Black Widow stand-in, because in the comics I read, in like the cartoons I watched, Cap and Black Widow were the ones that ended up together. Mm-hmm. So that's what I thought we were looking forward to, and I like the way that relationship went. But that's a whole different podcast, whole different movie. But that's all I thought she was, and I thought that's all she was going to be. But damn if she isn't one of my like favorite characters in the entire MCU. And yes, I may be biased because I met her once, and she is the most gorgeous person I've ever seen on planet Earth in real person. And but she's definitely one of my favorite characters. I love Agent Carter. I think it's such a well-crafted show. And that leads me to Howard Stark. Also, really cool that we got to see him after seeing, Tony Stark in 2 of his outings. We get to see his dad, and I felt like this in, in the First Avenger and into the Agent Carter show, and like all the other little scenes we get of Howard Stark. I think that makes some of the payoffs or some of the stuff we get in like an Iron Man 2. Where he's just like, my greatest creation will always be you. Like there's stuff like that where it's like, now it feels earned, because when you first saw that, it's just like, well, this is like the first time we're seeing like Howard Stark talk. So like, I don't give like, this is the only interaction we've ever seen between these guys. And I don't know, just seeing how like he is such like such like Tony, and then seeing him in like Agent Carter, seeing him in Civil War in the beginning and stuff like that, or in Ant-Man, just these little scenes. It's like, now it feels earned.
Oh no, yeah, most definitely. I definitely think Dominic Cooper was a good cast for a young Howard Stark, and I like how how you said like this kind of like wove it all in together to be able to connect it and give so much more meaning to the character than you really appreciate it. It more at the end, and it kind of goes back to like in Avengers 2012, whenever Steve and Tony are talking, and he was like, "Oh, I only knew Howard when he was young and single," and that's when Tony goes. He basically says like a snotty comment like, oh yeah, like as if dad never talked about you only like 1 billion times, or he says something to that effect. But like it shows like even after Cap was gone, or when he was presumed gone, how much of an impact he had on Howard as well. And so you definitely can appreciate that as well. It's like the little things.
Yeah, it comes up again in Civil War, and in in Agent Carter, like at the end, like because Howard Stark's a big part of season 1, and then it comes out like he gets exposed to like a gas that shows you like your worst nightmare or whatever, or like your biggest regret, and it talks about him not finding Cap, like what's his biggest regret, like he found the Tesseract and stuff like that, which is still kind of iffy, like how do you find the Tesseract and not find Cap, but obviously they didn't think he would survive something like that. But yeah, so it really isn't just like on a face level, like, oh, you just kind of work with the guy. He definitely does have strong feelings for him. And there's a lot of stuff in there that we don't get to see, like him with the Howling Commandos and stuff like that, and how much time actually passed, during the war. But then again, like, obviously, you wouldn't have thought he would have survived that.
No, and I think it was kind of neat to see it almost come full circle when you think about it, because even though Howard couldn't find him and couldn't do anything for him, because I mean he carried that guilt with him, obviously, Tony was able to be with him, and not only just be with him but team up with him, be an Avenger with him. And so it's almost like even though Howard couldn't carry that on for himself, his son was able to. So I think that's really rewarding.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't even think about that. He still, indirectly or not, he still created something that would end up helping Cap, It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those things where you don't think about it until you actually look back and reflect on it. And it's such a nice little touch that Kevin Feige, of course, put his magic hands on. Everything he touches is literally turned to like gold at this point with the MCU.
So good. I don't know what this would be without him.
Oh, I know.
But so there was, after I initially watched this movie, I thought it was really good, but I thought that it took way too long with like the bail bond stuff and like that showgirl stuff. Like I didn't like it. I was just like, can he be Captain America already? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's like when you first see the movie, it's like, okay, what, place does this really carry?
Mm-hmm.
I get, the nod to the original Cap from the comics because the dress-up suit that he's wearing is exactly like the one that Cap has in the comics that Jack Kirby, did in the 40s. But then it's like, looking back, was that the best moment to put in the film? Don't really know. I mean, it gives you some small things to kind of appreciate, like when he takes one of the dancers' helmets when he goes on his rescue mission to go get Bucky and the rest of his unit whenever they're missing and presumed dead by after being kidnapped by Hydra. But that's a really small detail. You don't really need something like that present in the film just to get something small out of it. But I mean, I appreciate the nod to the original suit in, the original comic, like the very first issue, because it's him punching out Hitler. And, of course, that was on the cover of the very first issue, if I'm not mistaken, that Jack Kirby did. So good little nods there. Could it have been shortened? Yes. Was it completely necessary? Not really. But, of course, this is early phase 1 days of MCU, so I'll excuse it.
He had to sock Adolf on the jaw.
What's that quote that he says? They're like, oh,
why should we follow you?
Yeah, why should we follow you? He's like, oh, I've knocked him out like 47 times or whatever weird number it is.
It was great. I love also in that moment where he's like, oh, we're taking everybody. I'm from Fresno, Ace.
Yeah.
But before I forget, there was a through line that I noticed this time around that, like he tried to be that kind of yes man guy where he's like, okay, I'll go and I'll, sell these bail bonds and stuff like that, serve my country that way. But then, he wants to do something, sees that Bucky's in trouble, and he chooses Bucky over listening to Tommy Lee Jones's orders,
Mm-hmm.
So there's always that, like he's always choosing to do what's right over what, is protocol, over what the law is. It's always something he feels inside of him because the best hands are still his.
Exactly.
So
and
it's
he
not
touches on that
crazy.
too, and he touches on that quote too in Civil War, where he's like, the safest hands are still our own, and so you can tell that's like been instilled in him from day one.
He's like you said, it was just going to amplify, his personality traits. And I don't think it was a big leap like it was in the comics for Civil War for Cap to turn his back, on the law, on the government. For this, they planted the seeds here. They planted more seeds, or they watched them grow in the Winter Soldier, and then they reaped their fruit in Civil War.
Oh, most definitely, yeah.
I thought the Howling Commandos were really cool. I like Booby Miles. He was one of the Howling Commandos.
Oh, he did good, yeah.
And I like Dum Dum Dugan and his big old handlebar mustache.
Oh, yeah. Really cool. Neil McDonough. Yeah.
Damien Dark on the DC CW.
But we love him as a small hero in Marvel.
Yes. And I like how that actor comes back for Homecoming to be the principal.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like the descendant of the dude from World War II, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
There's an Easter egg in the Avengers Endgame trailer. We see the compass that was in this movie.
Yes.
With Peggy Carter's picture on it. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited.
I know. And that's just like, does that mean time travel for sure? Is he going to go back and just, say hi? I don't know. Who knows?
Well, for any New World nerds listening, if you don't want any spoilers, kind of mute this part. Okay, here it goes. So, basically, with Captain Marvel coming out, they're talking about how she has the ability to be able to do some sort of time travel, perhaps. So, they're talking about maybe that's how they go back, because, of course, there was shots where they're replicating scenes from 2012 Avengers as well. So, maybe that's part of it. You know, maybe the compass got rescued with Steve. We don't know, but we never saw it with him. And, you know, he never carried it around in any of the films after that. So, but.
Dun, dun.
Yep.
All right, now you can go ahead and come back. I'll put the time code in the thing. In the description. And, yeah. Yep, the whole movie I feel like holds up well. Let's talk a little bit about the Red Skull. Is he a good villain? I think so.
I think so too. Honestly, a lot of people up until the point of this film had come out, and maybe probably after it as well, were like, Marvel doesn't have a strong villain. It's usually Doctor Doom. They've failed at replicating that. What are they doing? They have heroes but no villains, blah, blah, blah. They kept referencing DC movies, and this is way before the DCEU existed. It was just the standalone films of Batman and Superman that had been replicated by various actors. I'm mostly talking about Batman. But anyway, a lot of people talked about how Marvel had a villain issue and how that really wasn't cured until you got Loki in 2012. But I personally thought Red Skull was a really good villain. Maybe he's not the strongest one in the MCU. Like, I'll give him that. I'll give the critics that. But I mean, you look at him and the way he's portrayed. One, Hugo Weaving did a really good job. I was disappointed in the fact that he didn't want to return. And it was all based on issues with having to act in the heavy prosthetics, which, I mean, I understand that's difficult. But I mean, as like a super fan, it's kind of disappointing to see someone part a franchise like that when they were able to contribute so much. I mean, he contributed more than what people think. And you go back to Infinity War, it's so full circle for his character too, even though he's portrayed by a different individual. But no, I really enjoyed his portrayal because it's one of those where it was like Erskine says, it amplifies parts of the personality. He was such an evil human being. It just amplified that even more, but then it also altered him physically. And so I think having the physical transformation scene, again, going back to the bridge scene whenever Bucky doesn't want to leave Steve and they're trying to figure out how they're going to escape, and he pulls off his prosthetics that he had showing what happened to him whenever he took the serum. I think it's a really good way to demonstrate a change of character without having to do so much. I mean, you know he's evil, but you don't know how much it's actually impacted him. And then you see his face, the way it's become, and it's like, no, he is on another level. He's changed so much.
Yep. And I love how he doesn't die in this movie. He definitely gets teleported.
Oh, I know. And most people, they're like, oh, he's dead. It's like, no, did you not see the beam? Did you not see space? Like, he went somewhere. Come on, guys.
A big old blue sky beam. We definitely got a bunch of those after this movie. Kept on
I know.
The blue sky beams in every superhero movie. Not even superhero movies. It was like in Ninja Turtles, too.
Oh, I know.
It's in everything. And then it breaks my heart when he I don't think it hit me at the time when he was talking to Peggy while the ship was going down. I don't think it hit me as hard as it does now, like knowing her story and like how even tragic it was. And then she even like when she finally gets him back, she's old, and it definitely hits me more now, especially when he wakes up like in present day.
Oh, yes, and he has the line. He says, I had a date.
Oh, man.
And that's how the film wraps up, basically, him saying, I had a date. And you think about it, and it's like, wow. They meant so much to each other.
Yeah.
And for that to be one of the first things he's concerned about, he doesn't even care that he's like 60-ish years in the future from when he last remembers. And it doesn't even matter that he is like surrounded by a bunch of like people who are just staring at him and are like figuring out like, is this guy crazy or like what's going on? Like, no, his first thought was, I had a date.
Yep. And that's it. That's the human, you know. That's why I love these Marvel movies, because they feel like real people. You know, what would happen if real people got powers? And it's just all their motivation is in people, and I really love it. And I got a pitch for the end of Endgame. This is all over. They defeat Thanos. Captain America can go wherever he wants. Takes the time stone, whatever he needs to do, goes back. And he finds Peggy, you know, they go or he meets her at a dance hall. What do they do? I don't know where they would meet up. They go, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry I'm late. And she goes, you're right on time. And then that's how the movie ends. Boom, pitched it, send it. Kevin, Feige, Russo brothers, take it. You can have that one it's for free.
And it's so bittersweet if you picture it that way, because it's like you don't get to have Cap with the rest of the Avengers in the present, but at the same time, he's contributed so much. You want to give him the ending he deserves, and you don't to send him off with his one true love. Like, who, you know, could write that even better?
Yeah, and don't talk about the time he kissed her knees.
Oh my gosh.
We don't talk about it. We don't talk about it.
It's unspoken about.
Yes. And the post-credits for this movie was literally a trailer.
It really was.
It's literally a trailer for Avengers. And I wasn't complaining at the time. I was like, what are they going to give us? You know? And because this was the movie before Avengers. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Next week, we're reviewing Avengers. And
yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Like, when that happened, like when Tony Stark slaps Thor's arm, is like, don't worry, Point Break, you got a mean swing.
Oh,
like,
that was so hilarious.
Like, that's my shit. Like, that's what I wanted for so long. Since I found out that Nick Fury was at the end of Iron Man saying, I want to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative. This was our first taste of them all together, and ooh, it was sweet.
It was so great.
It was great. I like this movie. We don't rank them here. It was a good time. I had a great time. I think it's just the first entry in a great trilogy. Any closing, anything else to say about Captain America: The First Avenger?
I think overall as a film, it did so well, considering we were, again, and I'll say it again, MCU Phase 1 days, where nobody knew if it was going to be a possibility, really, until seeing this film, that we were going to get the Avengers. I think it did a good job at laying the groundwork, laying the foundation for what we were going to have, not just with this character, but with the way we were going to moving forward. I mean, you just mentioned it right now, how you basically got a trailer for Avengers for the post-credit scene, and you look and it's like, this film did such a good job at telling an origin story, and yet it's not taking away from where it's going in the future. It's not trying to discount it either. It's saying, hey, we're giving a nod to him. We're telling his story because it's important. He's an integral part of the Avengers, and it needs to be told. And now that we've told it, this is the direction we're going. I feel like that's how it flowed from start to finish, and it was a really good way to pay homage to him without having to go so much into digging into the past as well. And I think, again, casting Chris Evans was probably the cherry on top of all of this.
Yep.
And you appreciate it so much more looking back than you did at the time. Like, I can tell you, I remember seeing that movie and I remember enjoying it. But the appreciation that I have now is nowhere near the appreciation I had for the movie when it first came out. And I mean, you know me, and if people don't know me, I am probably one of the biggest Captain America nerds ever. Like, you can ask Superman Nico, you can ask New World Gamer Justin, you can ask anyone.
Approved.
They will tell you about my Captain America collection of memorabilia that I've accumulated over the years and how much I've loved this hero since I was a kid, literally. I mean, we just talked about it not that long ago when we were talking about Spider-Man, how one of the first memories I ever had growing up was watching the Spider-Man cartoons and seeing the storyline from the old ones where they bring in Captain America and Red Skull because they were suspended like in time, or I forget what the exact storyline was.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I know.
Yes.
They were locked,
Yes.
together in another dimension or whatever it
Yes,
was.
yes. And that was like my first taste of Captain America, and I was like, wow, like, and then spoiler alert, for anyone who hasn't seen the old cartoons, but you can YouTube it, he has to give up his freedom and go back to that dimension in order to get Red Skull away from everyone and to make sure that Spider-Man and everyone else is going to be safe and conquer whatever threats are still left. And he gives that up even though he's been stuck for so long. Like, that's such a true testament to what this character is. And so I so appreciated that Chris Evans' development of this character has grown to be more like that, to be more of the Captain America we all know or have come to know, whether it's through comics or other, different film media or, the different cartoons that are out now. But he laid such a good foundation in this film that you have so much more appreciation for it now. And so even though maybe the quote unquote worst ranked one in the trilogy, and that is totally misleading, it is still a good film, a good standalone film in and of itself.
Definitely. And I think it's less a superhero movie than it is a story about a soldier who happens to be super, and I definitely appreciate it, like you were saying, appreciate it more now. I appreciate how it took its time, to develop the character of Steve Rogers and to make sense of the decisions he made in this movie and the decisions he would go on to make in other movies, which I honestly didn't appreciate at the time. And talking about Phase 1 Marvel, I think this is a good movie, but I think the quality definitely went up with Avengers and ended up growing exponentially whenever Disney ended up buying Marvel Studios.
Oh, most definitely.
Which was sometime after Avengers came out, and you see it, and so it's kind of hard to compare it to the movies that come out now, like the origin movies that come out now. But I'd put it up there with like these newer origin movies, like a Doctor Strange or something like that. I don't think there's a big discrepancy, maybe in of course in like the special effects and stuff like that, but this isn't a very effect heavy movie compared to other superhero movies.
Yeah, they used a lot of, I think, the phrase is called practical effects, meaning where it's more like actual stunts are done and they use like, real objects like real fire starters, like that kind of stuff to do the explosion scenes and all that. And so you can tell they relied more, not the majority of the film, but they relied more on practical effects than most people do nowadays with action-packed films of this type of caliber. And so to see how well they were able to carry that out, I think is good as well. I mean, like you said, it's a testament to the time of where it was at as far as special effects is concerned, but it was still at that point where whenever they incorporated CGI, they made sure it was good. Whenever they had practical effects, they made sure it was good.
Definitely. I think the only bad thing I'd have to say about this movie is that weird submarine boat Hydra thing. I don't know what that was.
Oh, yeah, in the beginning. That's when you see him. He's like finally Serum Steve and he gets dressed and you see the Hydra double agent that's hidden there and he kills Dr. Erskine. Oh, God rest his soul. I loved his character. He did a lot for Cap, more than what people think. You see him chasing after him. He gets the Cap door that has the star on it. Another nod to the shield that's eventually going to be a part of Cap's eventual superhero career and his heroism and whatever hero antics he's up to. But yeah, that was something that, now that I think about it and that you mention it, it really didn't do anything for the plot except maybe like, oh yeah, he's super strong. He just pulled this guy out of a submarine car or whatever. But I mean, did it really contribute to the story overall? Not really.
But I did like how that kid was like, don't worry, I can swim.
Oh yeah, that was funny.
What do you think? You think I can't swim over here? Yeah, that was great. That's all I have to say. Are you good on Captain America: The First Avenger?
Yeah, I think I'm good. I mean, there's definitely like not much else I can say that's already been said. I mean, I kind of went on my little soapbox to talk about it for a bit.
Hey, that's the whole thing. That's the whole reason this podcast was made.
Oh
Get on
yeah.
your own soapbox.
And definitely whatever we didn't touch on is because it's probably having a bigger role in either Winter Soldier, Civil War, or both. So if you didn't hear like enough Bucky, for example, that's coming. Trust me. I'm also a Sebastian Stan enthusiast, and I met him this past August, which is great. He is such a nice, genuine individual. Another like Chris Evans-esque type of actor as well. But again, if you didn't think there was enough Bucky, we will touch on that in Winter Soldier most definitely, and definitely in Civil War.
Yeah, not a really nice guy, and I'm pretty sure he's easy on the eyes as well.
Yes. But don't tell Justin.
Oh, no. I'm just going to send him this bit when I'm editing it for sure. Well, yeah, guys, don't feel bad that Jackie is leaving us, because she will be back for the other 2 Captain America movies, most definitely.
Yes, I will.
All right. Thank you so much, Jak-Attack, for joining me here.
Thank you, Superman Nico.
Of course. That's going to do it for us here at the New World Nation. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Make sure to find this podcast on SoundCloud and on the channel as well. Thank you guys so much for listening to the end. Keep nerding out there, true believers.